For the workflows, what we do is we allow first classification to come through. We do that within a matter of a couple seconds. We then do the risk assessment, a couple of seconds for that. And we can lengthen that out. And of course, as you can imagine, the longer time you take, the more sites and other things you can scrape to be able to improve the results. But that's usually capped between somewhere around 10 seconds and 15 seconds. We then want to return that back to whatever party it is and give them that classification and the risk assessment for that business. I should mention, by the way, this sounds common, but when you apply it to the small, medium-sized business space, where it's not a big data problem, it's a small data problem, this is really hard stuff, right? And so that's what we're delivering, is value in a space that the traditional tools don't work quite as well, and you have to be very creative about how you're solving the problem. I think what we're offering to the insurance industry is the ability to be able to realize some of the same kind of gains that we all experience on a daily basis with most of our tools. And I just think the light bulb needs to go on that, you know what, we're not taking away freedom for the agent or for the carrier to choose how to implement this internally. But what we are offering is the ability to be able to augment that, same way that we get augmented when we're using some of these technologies that we use on our mobile phone and when we do Google searches and others. Now, maybe it's time for us to start to make use of the machine capabilities to augment what we're doing, not necessarily replace. And that's really what they want to do, but rather to augment and give them information and insights that they can then choose to be able to accelerate their business. When we say that there's something that is a classification for the business or as a risk for the business, we wanted to make sure that we could pinpoint precisely the text in the document that we say that's the issue. That way, when somebody is faced with a regulatory challenge, fairness in price, ESG, whatever it may be, that they can then talk to the regulator and say, here's where we got here's where we got the information. There is no bias in what we're doing. We can prove it to you. Here's the exact spot. Here's the text. Our feeling is that SMBs are an underserved market, even in the United States. Of course, if you go outside the US, it's even more so, where it's difficult for them to get insured, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that process is not something that they're really familiar with. They don't have a lot of time. They view it as an expense. So I want to just kind of build on what Alan said a few minutes ago, because I think it was well said. The idea here is to be able to take something that is high volume and turn it also into something that's high margin. And if we can facilitate that in a way that is fair, open, and unbiased, now you've got the ability to be able to open the market to SMBs that otherwise wouldn't be getting insurance. You also have the ability to even change the culture of insurance, where it's no longer perceived as an expense, but rather either maybe not quite as far as an investment, but certainly as a tool to de-risk their business so they can grow. And so philosophically, those are the kind of things that we always keep bouncing around. And I think it really does influence very heavily our product strategy. So for us, our perceptions have been that we feel that whatever the company says to their customers is a pretty good indication of what they do, right? Whatever they say to somebody else may not be. Because it's marketing, it may be a lot of different things, right? But if they're going to be selling a product, we believe that that's an important part of identifying what the risks are associated with the business, and of course the classification. So we rank a company pretty high about what they say about themselves to their customers, right? Compliance is yet another piece to this, right? And compliance takes different forms. One of those is, what licenses do they have? Right? What policies do they carry? What sort of things are they, through the government, required to be able to operate? To me, that's crucial as well, and it really indicates who they are, because there's a pretty high bar for quite a few of those. And then lastly, we typically will look at social media. And in aggregate, if you can get enough social media, it actually means a lot. It can be very useful. But for a number of these businesses, there may not be any, or there may be a little, and in which case it still has some influence, but it doesn't influence things very much. So it's typically those three things: company, compliance, and customers. And I really want to be clear that in all of that, we're always seeking for facts, not opinions. Is there a way we can distill that down into facts that we can then point to in a document that's the fact? That's where we derive the fact from. And so one of the things that I would say to avoid, and we do avoid this, and unfortunately, because when we're evaluating companies, we can steer clear of a lot of the issues that might be there ethically. But one of those would be demographics, right? If you start plugging in a bunch of demographic data and then make assumptions from that, that's not a great idea, right? Another one would be if, and we can get some of this information where you go out and you crawl, you return back the owner, the directors, the board of directors. And the problem is, again, if you start to factor them into the risk, now you're getting into all kinds of privacy issues there as well, right? I would argue, although to be clear, I'm very much a fan of image recognition, but I do worry that depending upon how things are used, you can introduce bias because the deep learning network that's taking a look at that image, or is at least looking at that image, may associate the wrong object, may associate something about it that can bring in bias because of the way it's viewed. And often it's viewed because of what it's learned from other people who have viewed it, right? I get you can also have some of that same stuff with NLP, but it's just something you have to be a little more cognizant of, right? And my feeling is that maybe a good bar to use is if you can collect information that you find is reusable across industries, and then also can be linked back to the document, that it's a good way to be able to show that you're not getting so deep into something that you're introducing too much or if any bias, but you're still introducing something of value. And so that's it's kind of the way we've been looking at things, is not to go down a rabbit hole, right? But rather stay at a place where maybe this could be reusable. And that's a way for us to be able to stay out of those rabbit holes and stay focused.